Hey,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to do something really quick at the start of this episode
Okay.
because the reason I'm wearing a nice shirt today instead of my typical t-shirt.
Chewbacca outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am, as soon as we're done recording, I am going off to my niece's wedding reception.
Okay.
And her name is Zoe. She's a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. And so
Okay.
I'm just going to shout out to Zoe on Brandon Sanderson's show. Happy wedding and hooray. You're awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Zoe. Yeah. So that'll be fun. I don't have to go to any wedding receptions tonight.
You don't.
I don't really like them, but I don't think anyone does. But we all acknowledge that they are an important part of society, and it's good to be there to support people.
This one's going to be in a park.
Oh, that's nice.
I've never been to one in a park.
There's got to be someone out there who likes wedding receptions, right? Like, maybe. Does anyone here like? Okay, Donald.
I think wedding receptions have a lot of fun. You know, it's an opportunity to celebrate someone you likely care about, and if nothing else, you get free cake and an opportunity to go home and complain to someone, probably.
Okay.
My thing with wedding receptions is that it's always like, I love my niece Zoe. We're going to go to a party about her, and then you never really get to talk to them because they're in the line the whole time.
Yep. And then so you sit with your family and friends.
Yeah. And you're just like, how long do I stay before it doesn't look rude for me to leave?
Yep. At least I gave you a sword.
You did give me a sword at your wedding reception, not at mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have it. I've decided actually that I need to bring it here and put it in my office.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I want to hang that on the wall. I want to get a batleth and hang it on the wall. And I want to get a moonblade from the Greenbone saga and hang that on the wall.
So I once went to DragonCon. This was, not that long ago. It was definitely pre-COVID, a couple years before pre-COVID. I was a guest at DragonCon, and as I was leaving, my wife is like, I'm like, can I get you anything there? And she's like, no, get me a batleth, jokingly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, she's getting a batleth, right? If you don't know, this is like the Klingon sword.
Mm-hmm. I think you've told this story on the podcast.
Okay.
Am I misremembering that?
If so, it's been a while.
Yeah.
There were no batleths for sale.
No batleths at DragonCon.
The entire dealer's hall. People
That's terrible.
all the sword people are like, yeah, we can't get them anymore. Maybe the license fell apart or something like that. I failed in my quest to get my wife a batleth.
It's terrible.
Yep.
Well, when I get mine, I will get one for her.
So today we are going to actually do a sequel. So we had an episode a while ago that was fatherly advice. And you and I struggled to give actual good fatherly advice until Donald said, here's a question I would have as a person in his 20s about the age that our children could conceivably be.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald, you're 20 years older than, or 10 years older than my eldest. So, but Dan
about the
is
same age as my oldest.
Dan is an old geezer. Despite being a year younger than me, somehow Dan is also 20 years older than me.
Yeah.
Which is the weirdest
Raising
thing.
my son Ethan will do that.
Yeah. And so being the senior member of the podcast, Dan, anyway, once Donald asked us, then we're like,
here in state.
Now we have context and we can give actual advice. So we thought we'd have Donald throw some more questions at us and see if we have good advice or bad
good things
advice.
to say. We will endeavor to not be reductive about the economy.
I was good in that episode. You were bad in that episode.
I know. I mean, you were reductive as well, but you admitted that you were being reductive.
Yeah.
And apologized for it.
Yeah.
So.
And I do think that with a broader perspective, there are certain trends and things that we're in the middle of a bad trend. And I do think things will get better, but maybe never as good as they were for when we were. But when we were in college, it still wasn't great. Yeah, at least that us as Gen Xers at least got a taste of how things are without being able to have to or being forced to sit and eat the whole meal. Yeah.
So for questions, this one is struck out to me. We live in a time, right, where we're told to take up every opportunity that comes about us.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a significant time when you've had to say no and be like, I can't or won't take this opportunity
Oh, man.
for X reason?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning how to say no is one of the best skills I've developed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask really quick. Are these questions people have asked in the feedback from the previous episode, or just questions that you have in your own head?
Combination of both. So I've seen a lot of the comments, and most of the comments from the last episode were talking about the advice that was given. But this is one that I've even had someone ask me, which is, how do you say no? And I myself was like, I've never had to say no to an opportunity yet that I've really struggled with.
Though before we get to this question, let's point out that unpaid intern Donald is now actually unpaid uninterned Donald.
Hooray!
Because
he is both paid and employed.
But he was always paid. So you said he was unpaid. So if he was unpaid then, he's unpaid now. Because he was...
Oh, yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
he's unpaid in a different way.
Yes. But he's a full-time employee of my company, somehow unpaid, uninterned.
Can we call him an untern?
Unturned.
Unturned Donald has wonderful questions for us, including this one, which we keep not answering.
Yeah. How do you say no? It is hard. And there are different eras of saying yes and no. The truth is that when I was young and struggling, I don't think I ever said no. I said no to things that I wanted to do, but because I couldn't afford them, right? Like my friends would go to Europe, and maybe I could have scrounged together the money, but what I needed to be doing was working on my books and things during that era. And so those were easy no's, but it's those hard no's, right? When someone comes to you, like these days, I'm in a different state. It's like people want me to visit everywhere, and I want to be really nice to them, and I want to go see them, but I can't do it all. But this is not really about that. What about when you're young and you have an opportunity?
See, back then, like you, I think I said yes to every... We're talking about opportunities here and employment in particular. Yeah. If someone was willing to pay me for something, I would do it.
Oh, I did it. I did say no.
Ooh, when?
So I have told the story when I worked at the library in college and they fired me.
Yeah.
Right? Square peg, round holes, what they told me. It was the whole thing. And the problem is that I had then committed to going to college and I had to pay for it somehow. Right? Yeah. And so they didn't fire me early. They gave me a month. Right?
To find work?
No. They gave me a month of working there knowing I wasn't a good fit. So what they would do, they admitted this. They say for the job that I took, they would hire 4 people for 2 positions. And then they would give them a month and see which 2 were the ones that worked the best, and they would let the other 2 go. And part of the contract was they didn't have to fire you. It was in the contract that at the end of the month there's a review, and then you either pick up employment or not. They made it sound to me like that's just a formality. But the truth was, they later admitted they overhire for the position to see who's the best person,
who fits.
Which I think is really duplicitous.
It is,
right?
That's especially, boy, if you'd have known that you were competing with those 3 people, and that you're suddenly thrown into a library-shaped gladiator arena,
and competing with them. Not on who can, I've told you this, like why it was a bad job. It's not on who can help people find the books they want. It's who can search the catalogs best for the books that the librarians want to buy. That's what you're supposed to spend your whole day doing. Yeah. It was a miserable job. But I needed the job, and then they're like, you're one of the ones we're not picking up your contract. I'm like, I'm a month into the semester. Like, what do you expect a person to do?
Yeah.
And so I went to the dark side briefly and went to a call center because the call centers will always be hiring. Yeah. Because the jobs are the worst jobs you can get as a white collar job, right? It's got to be the worst white collar job in the entire world, right?
I did it for about a month and a half one summer in high school, and yeah, it's horrible.
And I'd done it before. I had to do campaign calling for my uncle who was running for mayor, and my mom signed me up for the job and then said, "You have to do this. I promised them you would."
Terrible.
Right? And so call centers, the worst. Nobody wants to be there, but they will hire you.
Yeah.
Like that. And so I went and interviewed and had a really good, of course, I was like, they want anyone who has enough intelligence to follow the script, and they pay really well, right? So for me at that time, this was like a job that was paying like $13-14 an hour. Minimum wage was like, $5.75. It was probably $7.25. It's probably what it is now. But it's like double what I could get somewhere else. And in the meantime, my roommate Micah was working at the hotel, and this was my dream job because I could write while I was at work. And it's service oriented. I like helping people. If I didn't get to be an author, being there and actually making sure that someone's room is really nice and I can fix the problems for them is really satisfying to me.
Yeah.
But he's like, think someone's going to leave in a couple of weeks and we're going to have a hole in the night shift. And I I got the call back saying, "You're hired. Come in, fill out the paperwork for the call center." And I said no, because it felt like
you were banking on this night job.
I put everything in. The night job was going to pay $7.25 an hour and was only going to give me 2 nights a week, because it was the weekend person. They had someone for 5 days, and the weekend person they knew was leaving.
Yeah.
And I wasn't guaranteed the job. I'd have to go interview, and it was 2 nights a week, which was like, to make rent and everything I needed, it would not cover it. Right? It would eat into my savings. But Micah thought I could eventually pick up more nights, right? And so it was really tenuous. Like, it was basically getting a job that could not pay my living expenses, with the hope that in a few weeks or a month after showing I could do it, I would get more shifts.
Yeah.
But I said no, and I took that one. And it is part of what made my career, because just that soul-crushing being in a call center would have been awful.
Yeah. And there's no way you could write in a call center.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. I mean, that's the antithesis of having any mental space to yourself. It would have been better for me to go and work fast food or something like that, because at least my brain could occasionally be working. Like, if I'm a fry cook, and that's what but nobody was hiring, not even that. Like, the call center is this great, it's Sauron's army over there saying, "All right, we'll take you." And so I said no, and it worked out. Making myself miserable. I would have rather skipped that semester and had to, but of course they fired me from like
in
after
the middle
the
of the semester. Yeah.
After the date were the blowout date, but yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So yeah. Why did I say no? I knew it would crush my soul. And the not being able to keep going to college was worse than having my soul crushed.
Yeah. Well, and, if the question is how to say no.
Yeah.
So much of growing up is just learning how to be okay with disappointing people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for example, that call center job, they probably didn't think about you saying no for more than 10 minutes before moving on to hiring the next 20-year-old to fill it. We tend to put too much stock in other people's reactions to what we do. And yes, sometimes we are going to disappoint someone, but most of the time when we're worried about that, it's not as big of a deal as we make it out to be in our head. It's okay to prioritize yourself. It's okay to, say no to things. And there's plenty of other people who can fill in, who can do that sort of thing. It hurts me more when I say no to conventions, because then I know that I'm not a faceless 20-year-old employee. I am Dan Wells, and a convention wants me to come and be a part of it, and they have come for me specifically. And when I have to say no to those, it is very hard.
Those are the hardest ones for me. That's why I let someone else do the saying no. And now this, again, is a privilege that I have.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know like new authors that use family members for things like, for instance, fan mail. They'll say, read all the fan mail, all the reviews, bring me the good ones, summarize the bad ones if there's something I need to hear, so that there's a barrier between you and them. And using somebody else to be like, this is why agents exist.
Yeah.
Being able to say to the agent, go tell them, no, I'm not taking their offer, I don't have to do it, is nice.
Yeah. Well, and, back to the thing about conventions or blurbs. People send me, will you please read this and blurb it? I always want to say yes to everything because, again, I don't want to disappoint people, and I'm so sad about that. But what I have found is that almost every single time, if I'm just up front and say, you know what, this is not something I have time for right now, I'm sorry, everyone's very understanding about it. It's easier to say no than you think it's going to be if you're not good at saying no yet.
Let's get another one.
Kind of following on this same note, this is one I'm interested in. When you have quote unquote failed, be it in a professional situation or a personal situation, what has been the most helpful thing to you to help recover? What actually helps you grow out of those painful situations that at the time look bleak, but upon reflection, you're like, oh, this has helped me become a better person, a better employee?
I will say some of the advice we'll give here is pretty obvious, but it really does help to remind myself in a week I won't really even think about this. Right? I will, but it'll just be another one of those things that's faded that I look back and I'm like, man, I could have done better, but it will no longer have the emotional attachment to it. Learning to train myself to be like, all right, understand that has helped.
Mm-hmm. When I have been through things like that, one company, for example, that didn't lay me off, they fired me. Conversations I have had with friends where I have just blown up and lost a friend. Whenever I have done that kind of a failure, what I find works for me is, first of all, taking responsibility for it. Like if I just continually and forever tell myself, oh, it was that friend's fault, it's not my fault, then that is not going to help me at all. What that is going to do is make me bitter about that mean friend that was mean. Whereas if I accept responsibility for my part of that argument and conversation, then that helps deflate that tension a little bit. And then step 2, I have to, and this is for my own self, I have to take some kind of meaningful step to be better. I got fired from this job because of X reason. I am now going to change something so that I don't do that again.
Yeah. I can see that. And I will say that, getting let go from the library, later on at the hotel, I had the manager pull me aside and be like, one of the reasons they let me go from the thing is the detail work. Detail work isn't necessarily my strong suit because my head is on Roshar, right? And so me searching through catalogs to find out the books we don't have in the library and circling them was a really bad job for me because it takes all of my time, all my brain space, and my brain could do that, but you're paying me $7 an hour, right? And some people enjoy finding those. So at the hotel, there is one part of that job that needs to be done right, that is detail oriented, and it is going and making sure that everyone, the computer and the board that shows what people's rooms in, because they still had the board, match. right? You have a card you put in and it says this person is in this room and this is their rate and things like that. They don't have to do that anymore. They've gotten rid of the boards. But back in the late 90s, as we were all transitioning to digital, the board and the computer had to match. And I was getting that wrong without knowing it. Because of that same problem, right? This case, it went way better because the manager is a good manager. The manager said, he's done this 3 or 4 times. He needs to know. Pulled me aside and said, hey, this needs to be done right. Can we work on a strategy? And I came up with a strategy for double checking myself within the system that worked, and I never got another one wrong.
Yeah.
And so in that case, having a good manager who, like, a lot of times when people are doing something that bugs you or is wrong, they don't know that they're doing it. We don't know. I didn't know I was reading that wrong. Even though I'd had that warning sign at the library, like, I wasn't aware that kind of detail work was a weakness of mine in a professional capacity because, I'm in my 20s. I haven't had that many jobs.
Yeah.
And realizing, hey, I need to put into place a backup, you check it a second time in a different method to catch the ones that you'll miss. And I did, and I never got one wrong. And within a year, the same manager gave me an award for Employee of the Year. Right?
Nice.
That's a good manager, right?
Yeah.
He helped me figure out how to fix it, and I did, and he was part of it. But also, I made the decision. Like, I came to him and said, "Here's how I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Do you think this is a good idea?" He's like, "Do that." And so that was really a handy learning experience.
Yeah.
Systems and things like that. Like, we all have flaws. We all have things that we're better at and weaker at. And it's not a moral failing to be bad at reading, this 2 sheets and comparing them and missing some things.
Yeah.
The moral failing is not finding a way to be able to do that right, or not finding a job where that's not relevant, right? And so don't feel bad putting in systems. Like, I am religious and I I want to read my scriptures every day.
Yeah.
Is it... we have this sense of, if I were more religious, I just want to. I don't want to, right? I've read, right? So I put a system in place that says I always do these 3 things in the morning, and this is on a thing on the checklist, and I'm always glad I have done it. Is it a moral failing that I had to build a structure to make myself do this? No. Emily wanted to hang out with her friends, her old roommates some more, right? Is it a failing that they don't just naturally do that, but instead created a book group so they be together once a month? No, that's how you make these things happen. So, yeah.
That's such a good way of framing this whole thing, because I do think that the world today is so insistent on being who you are, being true to yourself, that we sometimes forget the part where we can be a better version of ourselves, right? That if I have to work for it, then that means I'm changing who I am, and all of a sudden I'm not me anymore. And no, that's not it at all. If you actively are trying to improve yourself, to develop a skill that you don't have, to cover for a failing that you are aware of, you're not being false. You are not ignoring who you are. You're just being a better version of who you are.
Though sometimes it is legitimately not your fault. Usually if there's an argument, part of it is you. But I mean, the worst, I don't have strong emotions. We've talked about this, right? I'm, for that reason, sometimes a bad person to talk to about these things, because I get over things faster and I never have as strong a reaction. But the worst time in my life in recent memory I can remember is a little stretch of time where, I'm not going to talk specifics, but a friend betrayed me on a deep and fundamental level, followed by the Wired article.
Yeah.
The Wired article, and why the Wired article hit me so hard is that I had invited this person in. I made the decision, right, to do, and then the article really hurt. And it was directly from choices I had made. But when you get taken advantage of, anytime you get scammed, you feel like it's your fault.
Yeah.
because you've been scammed. When you click on a phishing email, when you like, I should have known better. The warning signs were there. I should have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it hard. Those aren't your fault. Those things aren't. If you get phished, it's not your fault. Like, they are really, really, sophisticated these days.
Yeah.
Like with my team, I'll have to be like, Octavia's seen this recently. I'm like, is this real or is this phishing? And the whole team looks at it and is like, we can't tell. We'll have to go through other channels and find out if this is something real or someone trying to steal our information.
Yeah.
If someone scams you, it's not your fault for being trusting. Being trusting is a virtue, and they're taking advantage of that. So
yeah. Awesome. You have another question for us?
I do. Since this is, dad advice,
Yes.
one of the questions that's come to mind is, what has been one of the biggest challenges of parenting and giving advice to the younger generation? What is your advice on parenting? How do you,
the biggest challenge.
how do you overcome these challenges of parenting that you didn't even see coming?
So one thing that I have noticed with my kids is that it is very hard for me to teach a skill that I'm good at. Right?
Yeah.
That if it's something that comes very natural to me, then it's very hard for me to show my kids how to do it, because I'm just like, well, you just do it. My wife and I are both big academic nerds. We both got incredibly good grades.
Yeah.
I got scholarships that paid for college, like I said in the last fatherly advice thing. And just because I'm good at school.
Yeah.
And so I've got 2 kids out of my 4 that are similarly good at school. And the other 4, I don't know. Like, it's so hard for me to figure out, well, how do I study? How do I ingest information? And how can I pass that on and teach this person how to study and learn things? And it's really difficult to teach somebody something that you're good at.
Yeah. I mean, we've had that same thing. I was the same way, right? I test really well.
Yeah.
That's my secret to school is I test really well, which means that I can read something and retain that information for a short period of time and regurgitate it. And I know how test questions are formatted. And so, like, if I forget in high school, if I forgot there was a test that day, 10 minutes was enough to get me to get an A on the test.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, it's these 4 chapters. I can skim them and see where the questions are going to come from and things like that. That is a specific kind. Like, my sister Lauren could not do that. She's the best student, the best scholar among all us, and she's a teacher because it was hard for her. And so she actually learned how to learn. And when I went to college, we've talked about this. I had a really rough first year. She did not. But along those same lines, something very similar to that is I am, we just mentioned it, I am not a strongly emotional person. I am the opposite. Whatever, I am the, Mr. Glass in Unbreakable says, I knew there must be someone opposite to me, that if I always break, someone doesn't break. I am the opposite to the bipolar, right?
Okay.
If a bipolar person is always feeling different emotions, I'm the opposite, which is not, it's just, I'm the same every day, right? I have a son who struggles with mental health issues that I have studied for years to understand so that I can accurately write them into stories. But still these moments come where he's like, feel really bad, Dad. And I empathize because I do feel empathy. I'm not like, right? Like, if someone else feels an emotion, that's the strongest emotions I often feel, is empathizing with someone else feeling those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I deeply, dearly want to help. I'm not a robot there saying, well, just get over it. But I have never dealt with those things myself. And academic learning, like, I can tell you, cognitive behavioral therapy, I can tell you all these things. But when my son is there, like, I feel helpless. I can give him a hug. and I can tell him it'll be better. And I think that's all you can do. I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
And that is, but you feel that's the hardest thing, Donald, is when I want to help my son. I want him to feel better, but I am absolutely powerless to do anything more than give him a hug. And, maybe say a prayer and, ask if there's anything I can do.
It's hard. Having raised 3 kids, my 3 oldest all have depression. The younger ones might develop it at some point. I did what I could, but it was not until the past 12 months that I have understood where they were coming from.
Right.
And have just felt like, oh my gosh, you lived through this? This is what you were going through? It's a miracle that you did as good as you did. You're amazing.
What do you do? What would you do different?
What would I do different now understanding that?
Yeah.
I am much quicker to give my children the benefit of the doubt than I was with the older ones. And I am much quicker to say, to stop encouraging them to overcome something. Instead of saying, I know you feel bad, I know anxiety's bad today, but you got to go to school, just muscle through it. I'm a lot more likely to say, you know what? This sucks, and it's okay that it sucks. And if you just need to, retreat for a day, then you can.
But what if he's done that so much that he's going to have to repeat the year?
Well, and that's what we got into. It was a miracle that he graduated. And a lot of it just came down to, with him, what I ended up doing was figuring out what he could do and then doing everything else. I have written so many papers for school, with him sitting there next to me telling me what to write and what he's thinking. And I'm just like, okay, I can't help you with your emotions. What I can do is type this in a way that the teacher will understand it. Walking a very, very shaky line between just doing my son's homework for him versus helping him do it. But how would I do that differently today? Probably do the same thing, honestly. Figure out my daughter who's graduating high school this month, I have worked with her a lot too. One thing that she hates is poetry. I could just start talking in verse right now. Like, poetry comes so easily to me. And so when she had a big English paper there, I'm like, okay, you do all the things that you can do, and I will carry you the rest of the way. And I think that's a strategy that's worked for us.
There we are. I think we are out of time. You need to get to a wedding reception.
I do.
And so how's that, Ben? And Ben's children?